Welcome back to Open Line. Thank you for joining us tonight. Tonight we are talking about the voting rights bill going before Congress. It actually died in the Senate last week, but we're trying to see what may be ahead and what's ahead as this debate continues. Our guest tonight, Dr. John Vile from MTSU. I want to thank him for being here. And we know we've already had one caller. We've got another caller here I'm going to get to in just a second, but that phone number will stay on the bottom of your screen if you want to give us a call and weigh in on any of these issues we'll be covering tonight, whether it's voting rights or anything else. We would love to hear from you. And now let's get back to the phones. Linda, you are live on Open Line. Go ahead.
Yes. Is it only voting rights or is it anything political?
You can ask us whatever you want. We will test Dr. Vile here.
Okay. I would like your opinions. I saw on the news last week that one of the state lawmakers from over, I think around Paris, I think his name was Grigsley or something, is trying to pass a bill called Kyle's Law, about Kyle Rittenhouse. And he's just praising him, calling him a hero. He's the kid that killed the two people in Wisconsin and injured another. And first of all, I watched that trial. It was so unfair. That judge should have been replaced from the beginning. And he told this big lie that he was there to render aid. He was not a medic. He didn't do anything but walk around with his assault rifle and try to cause problems. And now people are making him out to be a hero. And I would just like your guest opinion of what he thinks of that bill they're trying to pass here in Tennessee.
Great. Thank you so much for calling, Linda. All right, Kyle's Law. Any information on that, Dr. Vile?
You know, I honestly don't know much more than what Linda told us. I'm pleased to hear about it. It's certainly, in my judgment, Rittenhouse was I don't necessarily think he was evil. He's a fairly young man. I think he sort of got caught up in the moment. I think he considered himself a defender of the businesses there. But, I can't imagine anybody, whether he was guilty of manslaughter or not, that was for the jury to decide. And I agree that the judge, to the degree that the judge seemed to have bias, it was for the defendant. On the other hand, our criminal system works under the principle that people are innocent until they're proven guilty. So it may not be as biased as it appeared, but to say that he wasn't guilty of manslaughter and then to suggest that he's therefore should be put on some kind of pedestal, I think is completely, I do not favor that. And this is, and again, with no, I'm not familiar with the lawmaker that she mentioned here, but this is a kind of symbolic issue that, people rally around. It gets you ideological support, but what does it accomplish? I mean, other than maybe to convince some other poor deluded youth that they ought to go out there and start shooting people too. It's just, a society is judged by who it praises and blames. And while I don't necessarily blame him for manslaughter, what he did was not a praiseworthy thing. At best, it was, just sort of thinking he was doing right, but not having sense enough to keep out of the way and not care. Who carries an armed weapon to demonstrations? Like, if we want, the First Amendment guarantees the right of peaceable association. But I'm increasingly worried that, if we have rallies where people, especially from both sides, start bringing guns, I think it's going to have a real chilling effect on speech and on association and on assembly. So I don't think what Rittenhouse did was a praiseworthy thing.
We've got some more calls coming in. Let's get back to the phone here. Tom, you are live on Open Line. Thanks for calling us.
Good evening. My question is, when did women get the right to vote in this country? And could black women also vote? Thank you very much.
Okay. That's actually a great question, because at least in theory, and I say theory because, the 15th Amendment was adopted in 1870. and it prevented discrimination on the basis of race or previous condition of servitude. So, at least in theory, and some black men did during that time vote, but white women and black women did not. They got, now, some states beginning with Wyoming, I believe in about the 1880s, but I may be mistaken on that. But beginning in Wyoming, some states did eventually give women the right to vote. And the 19th Amendment was adopted in 1920. And I don't know if Tom may know this. It was actually the state that put the amendment over the top was actually Tennessee. And we recently, celebrated the year, I guess it was a year ago, 2020, we celebrated the 100th anniversary of the women's suffrage amendment.
All right, we've got one more call. Let's go to here. Taylor, you're live on OpenLine. Thank you for calling us tonight.
Is that for me?
Yes, go ahead. We can hear you.
Thank you. I appreciate the program and always appreciate the professor when he's on there. I will say that right off the bat, I am a conservative Republican voter. Don't get a lot of those calls to these kind of shows, but I want to talk about this Voting Rights Act. And my point is this. Republicans are always shown as somebody that was wanting to deprive someone of a vote. The biggest problem with this last bill that was rejected, it was rejected for the right reasons, and I'll mention two or three. I haven't made notes to keep my thoughts going right, but we'll see. First of all, every state in the United States will provide free a ID for someone to vote. That's been shown. Every state will give you a free ID. It's probably done through the same offices as the driver's license, so you can do that. This bill wanted you to be able to just show an electric bill in your name, and that would be okay. So that doesn't prove anything. You could be a citizen in this country for 2 days and have an electric bill in your name. So those sort of things just don't work for true ID. This party is trying to straighten out some of the misfortunes, and I'm not pretending to say the election was rigged, but there were so many problems because of the pandemic. States were allowing all kinds of things to take place that was outside the regular order. One of which is harvesting votes and using drop boxes. Now, we don't use drop boxes in Tennessee that I know of. That's where you can, an unsecured box sitting somewhere, you can drop off your ballot. Well, there's no security for anything like that, and I can see why the party opposes those. Other things, one thing that got so much attention was the fact that the one or two states had something about not giving water to people standing in line to vote. Well, that was just half-truth. What they were opposing was for party regulars and candidate regulars to be allowed to walk through those lines, handing out cookies and water and probably letting that person know who is providing the water and vote for my man because I'm giving you a bottle of water. So I can see where they only wanted the actual people running the election to be able to give away the water. And there are other things, but last but not least, elections are expensive. It's primarily the counties that pay for that. I've voted many, many times, and it's always I've been behind black voters, in front of black voters, and I've never ever seen anything less courteous to those voters than to me or anyone in my party that was voted. So these people that work the election, I've never been around the counting part later, but the people that normally handle these are just your local folks, more volunteer than anything else, so I think they pay them some small stipend. And Tennessee allows about 14 days of early voting, which I think is great. I normally vote that way, although I wait till the last minute of that part because I'm afraid my candidate may be arrested or be charged with DUI the day after I've already voted. So I'll wait till the last part of that. But at any rate, that is so much better than so many other states allow. So I think that's a great thing. And the hours, they're always complaining about the number of hours. Well, I think there's plenty of hours in our state and most others. And so my final point is this bill allowed too many things that was allowed during the pandemic voting, and some of that just was not right. So that's my point. And if anything the professor wants to add to that, I appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much for calling. Yeah, appreciate it. Thanks for giving us a call. Well, Taylor expressing his concerns there.
Yes, and you know, he reminds me, one of my favorite founding fathers is James Madison. And to my knowledge, the only election that he ever lost was actually his first one. And he was running against a fellow who owned a tavern and had no compunctions at all about setting out barrels of rum. He had been to Princeton, well, University of New Jersey, which is today Princeton, which and he was more principled than doing that. But every election thereafter, he allowed other people to buy rum on his behalf because it was expected by the people who voted. Taylor, you know, is reiterating something that I tried myself to express earlier, which is the voting rights were expanded. I mean, the opportunities were expanded in part as a result of COVID. And I think there's some pushback about what you do in an emergency may not necessarily be what you should have to do for each election. And again, you know, he expressed the one thing I would say is some of these communities, when he talks about giving food and water, it turns out that a lot of times minority communities seem to be the ones with fewer voting booths. And particularly in the Atlanta area, if I remember, there were lines as 3 and 4 hours compared to 5 or 10 minutes in other districts. And in cases like that, the prohibition on even party workers handing out water seems, you know, perhaps a little extreme, but that's part of what I think motivated it.
We are going to take another quick break, and we will be back with more Open Line right after this. Stay with us.